morning, everybody. If you want to join the class, please come sit, join the class. If you don't want to be in the class, you might want to be somewhere else. So, 11th Sunday after Pentecost, and the text for today is 1 Kings chapter 19. Small lesson on chronology. If you have your Bibles, you can open the Bibles and whatever Bibles you have. I know some digit stuff. If you have a normal Bible,
you don't have
like
to say it like that.
Sure, yeah. If you have a normal Bible like your pastor, yes, exactly. Not those, whatever. So if you have a normal Bible, you can flip one page back, and you will be in chapter 18. And in chapter 18, we have a very important event. The event is when Prophet Elijah fights, first of all, in liturgical way. He fights with a prayer with prophets of Baal and Ashtoreth or whatever, Ishtar, whatever the name is. The thing is, so it's a pagan attempt to present somewhat biblical perversion of the God who is in charge of everything, but he also have a supportive female role next to him, which is, in reality, we do have it in the Bible, but not that way. And what I mean is, we also have bridegroom and the bride. But in our case, the bridegroom is who? The bridegroom is Jesus, and he is the Son of God. But the bride is the church. That's us, okay? So we are doing godly, when we are doing godly things, we are actually doing the proper thing that God arranged to do. Unlike that, pagans try to isolate the male figure and the female figure, and they somehow together run the world. But that's a different story. So what happens in 18 is he fights with those prophets. He fights them again, first liturgically, because the whole chapter is about this wonderful event when they decided to see whose God is tougher and whose God is cooler. And through the whole event, Elijah does nothing else but mock them and, makes fun of them, calls them names and so on and so forth. Like in the middle of the chapter, when they began to, pray very extensively, he said, no, maybe you need to pray louder because maybe your God is asleep. Or in our translation, it doesn't say, but he maybe went to bathroom. So he goes for a private time, okay? So something like that. It's hilarious. And then what he does is, okay, guys, now your time is over. Let me do it. He has his altar made out of 12 stones, okay, which symbolize definitely 12 tribes of Israel, even though we are in a time of split kingdom. So we have Judah on the south with Simeon and some remnants of Benjamin and Levites with priests serving on the south, but we have a north. Yet he makes the altar out of united Israel. He goes back to the God of Israel as a whole. He, apart from those stones, what they did is they poured 12 buckets of water over that stuff. So to make sure it's like what we would call monkey business, seriously. If it will light up, if it's gonna ablaze, it's gonna be a miracle. And what happened is, after that, he prayed and said, if that's your will, please do it. And the fire came down from heaven. Sacrifice was taken up. And then he turns, and then, after spiritual warfare, they ended up in the normal warfare situation when they seized all of those false prophets and kill him. Okay? So what we have in chapter 18, in verse 40, right after everything was over, Elijah said to the people, because they fell down and began to worship true God Yahweh. Okay? So Elijah said to the people, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kidron and slaughtered them there. Now, to follow up with this, so we are on the mountain. Okay? We have altar here. And the fire comes down here. Okay, we have a fire here, and we have a bunch of people. Okay, they ended up in the brook, but we need to remember that so far we are in 3 years of drought. Okay, no rain, nothing. So they dump their bodies into this dry brook, and what happens right after that? From this verse that we just read to the beginning of chapter 19, we suddenly have a rain. So think about this. The water from above comes down. I'm going to have something bluish for water. And washes all of this dirt away. Okay? So the land was cleared or cleaned from whatever apostasy they went through. Now, with all of this glorious moment, what we see in our chapter is very interesting and intriguing. Because the guy who just won this spiritual war against the prophets of Baal, what he hears is the king, who was also there, and the queen was not. King was there, he comes back home, and he starts to, the word is not necessarily he like whined and cried, it's really he told his wife, but knowing the history, we knew who in this family what we would say were the pants. It was not Ahab, it was his wife Jezebel. So he told her what happened, and that's how our passage begins. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of those by this time tomorrow." So, two things about this. Okay, thing number one. It is very often when a country will end up in a political state when there is an official leader, for example, it's a King Ahab, and there is a supportive person, wife, sometimes mother, sometimes advisor, who actually runs the whole thing. Okay? So, in this particular case, as I said, we know who really ran the country, who really made the deals, who really solved the problems, or who really were active in achieving the goals. A few chapters later, there will be in chapter 21, yes, it is Jezebel who seized the vineyard for her husband. Her husband sits and says, Ahab says, I would like to have this vineyard. And she arranges everything that, first she approaches it, maybe you guy, Naboth, is going to sell it, but he didn't want to sell it, so he ended up being killed. So, going back. So she's kind of like that, I don't want to call her Black Widow, because she's not a widow, but she is that person, in a sense, kind of behind an official stage. So, when Ahab threatened, where I'm going to, is when Ahab threatened Elijah, he actually didn't really care. He came to this mountain Carmel and fought with prophets and so on and so forth. And he actually teased king himself too, because when they were going out of this mountain, the king was on his cart and Elijah was on his feet. And he said, I will run faster than you are. And the reason is, the rain came down, so the road got muddy, and the cart basically got stuck with metal wheels. It just couldn't move any near as fast as he was able to run by himself. Okay? But when threat came from Jezebel, for some reason, Elijah took it very seriously. So he runs away. He is afraid. When she announces to him that I will do the same thing as you did to those guys, on the mountain Carmel, he just gets up, flees, runs away really fast. we can talk about this if we need to, but most important to this moment is a very important textual note. I see that some of you have NIV. Can you help me? Because in ESV it says, Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah. What do you have?
What verse?
2.
Of 19?
Yes.
So Jezebel sent a messenger?
Messenger.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have another word in verse 2? Then what do you have in verse 5? And he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, who touched him?
An angel.
Okay. All bad. It's the same word. See, the thing is, in the Bible, the messenger and angel is one word. And this is somewhat misleading, and this is important to pay attention to. We have 2 messengers in this story. One is a messenger of death, the one who announces death to Elijah. And another one is a messenger of life, because that's the one who brings bread, or who actually makes bread for him, who feeds him, and who let him be fed in such a way or at such a level that he's able to walk for about 40 days and 40 nights. Okay? And if we go through translation, unfortunately it is lost. So again, it's the same word. There is another thing in what she says. In Genesis 1, we usually read, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? And in Hebrew, the word for God is Elohim. Okay? Now, in our text, what she says is, so may the gods do to me and more also. And actually, she uses the very same word. The reason why they translated Elohim is because we know what she believes in. She believes in many gods, and the word Elohim technically gives you it is possible and appropriate translation to translate it with the plural, because ending im in Hebrew means plural. It's masculine plural ending. Okay? Like, I don't know, chair, chairs. Okay? Like what we have with s at the very end of the word, which turns one word into plural. Okay? So the singular would be Eloach. Okay? So, but Elohim might mean one triune God, or it might mean gods, or, as we talked about this before, the word Elohim actually would be better translated as higher power. Because sometimes the word Elohim is used for human beings. Okay? Do you know where? In very famous Exodus story, if we'll go into book of Exodus in chapter 7, that's what God says to Moses. And the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh. Okay, there is no word like. So 7:1, Exodus 7:1. So what Lord teaches Moses is he will be the higher power for Pharaoh. It is when Moses comes and says, okay, all water will turn into blood. What happens? All water turns into blood. Okay? Your land will be filled with frogs. And what happens? Oh, all land filled with frogs, you know? All your cattle will have bruises and burning spots. Okay? The whole cattle falls down. Okay? And so on and so forth. So Moses is the higher power to Pharaoh. So when we read word God, it's not necessarily, first of all, it is not necessarily talking about, It is not necessarily referring to one true God. The important thing we need to understand is, again, it's a higher power. And we have our higher powers. So when people say they do not believe in God or gods, it's actually wrong whatsoever. They do have their gods. Whatever they dedicate their life to, money, career, family, anything, it's their God. Where they look for self-identity, security, and the purpose in life, those three things build up any person's theology, in any person's God understanding. Okay, it can be government, it can be aliens, whatever, you name it. Yes, Jim?
I was going to say it can be pagan gods.
Yes. Yeah. So in her statement, she means Baal and Asherah. That's what she means. So we will see. Let's go back to First Kings. Okay, we do not really have this literal stuff, but she is upset that he killed, so she swears by the name of her gods, and her gods are Baal and Asherah. You know, and if we read previous story, actually very careful, he requested, if we want to go to chapter 18, verse 19, now therefore, so he requests from Ahab, now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mountain Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So she was providing for 850 ministers of those deities. Okay, so she is very dedicated to those gods, Baal and Asherah. The problem is, in verse 22, when they came to Mountain Carmel, Elijah came near to the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to people, verse 22 in 18, even I only am left of the prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given, and so on and so forth. So they go into their fight, spiritual fight, but notice, he requested 400 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. Did the prophets of Asherah showed up? No, they did not. She did not send them. You know, she was much more dedicated to this fertile female deity, and she protected those prophets, and probably she did not expect that it will go so bad, but she was ready, in a sense, to sacrifice 450 prophets of Baal. Or she thought that there would be 450 prophets of Baal would be enough against one Elijah. Yes?
Weren't these men breaking the law or God's law by following Jezebel?
I'm sorry, what?
Were they not breaking the law?
They were. They were. But, you know, when your leadership is corrupt and when the country is following their leadership, that's what it is, you know.
So I was referring to the gender context that Jezebel was a female and that they were not supposed to be following a female. Is that right?
Not necessarily. No, I don't think we need to bring a gender context into this thing, because, for example, in the book of Judges in chapter 4 and 5, we have a story where it is the prophetess, and now I'm blanking on her name. Deborah, thank you. Leads godly fighter Barak into the fight against an attacking army. So I don't think we have godly male characters, we have godly female characters. We have ungodly male characters, and we have ungodly female character. So it's not the fact that she is a foreign wife does not necessarily mean that she's a bad person. Actually, the first wife of Solomon, the only one and true wife, for whom, or let me step kind of back, using the imagery relationship between Solomon and his wife, we have a beautiful song of relationship between Yahweh and his people, between Lord and the church. Okay? She was Egyptian, and that was totally fine. There should be no problem. The thing is, if we put some things together, Ahab and Jezebel are anti, or I don't want to say fake. It's another word I'm looking for, kind of blinking. They are
Imitate?
yeah, they are imposter of Solomon and his wife. Okay? So she is the one from foreign country, but instead of submitting to the Lord, she brings her deities. Okay? And he is, instead of being wise, he is dumb as doorknob, and he is weak and no, I mean, really, seriously. He is like between two poles. He kind of talks to Elijah, but then he goes back, and of course, the one who he sleeps with, turns his upside down, and he's like really paranoid and scared and so on and so forth. Yeah, so it's not necessarily a gender issue. It's an issue of her devotion to, if we talk about gods, yes, her devotion to gender-specific God is very unique. And usually, whenever you go into the history of anthropology or in the history of liturgy, whenever you have female divinities worshipped, very often, more than ever, you end up with human sacrifices. Not even necessarily with male-type divinities, but yeah. So one of them would be Anat, one very famous Anat. Also was very famous in Mediterranean territory. I mean, from the literature that we have, she would like lead peoples into battles and run in front of them with her sword and, killing, smashing people left and right. And it says that her mouth her kidneys were full of joy, and her mouth was full of laughter, and I don't want to go into gross details, but she would have like a necklace of some things that we do not want to talk about in the Bible study. So, very weird. But, so my point is, it's not because of the queen is a queen. You can have a godly queen, again, so before and after. We have Queen Esther, who basically saves the people. We have a lady who is a supportive role for one of the Roman guys. And if you remember, the wife of Pontius Pilate sends him a message. You better not to do anything for this guy. Okay? And that's the only thing we know about her. Seriously. She never showed up. We do not see her as a disciple of Jesus like Mary Magdalene or some other ladies, who were faithful around Jesus. No. Out of the blue, she appears, gives a wise advice, and he tries to somewhat listen, but he can, whatever. That's the difference. So I wouldn't go there. But going back. Say what?
Nothing?
That's not fair. If you say something, say, wow.
No, you did that.
Okay, now. We spent too much time. Verse 2. So I will do this and this, and I will, I pledge by Elohim, by my belief in gods, and then, if I will not make your life as the life of the ones who you slain by tomorrow. So, one more thing about the word life. There are few words that describe life in Hebrew, and this word is actually nephesh, which means soul. It's the same word that we find in Book of Psalms, for example, in 103:1 and 104:1. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Okay? So, looking back, we can theoretically translate, bless the Lord, O my life. So, it's not only those emotions that are in my soul that should be blessing or praising the Lord. I will bless the Lord, or I will dedicate my life in full to the Lord. With my words, with my emotions, with my actions, with my thoughts, with whatever I have and whatever my possessions. So that's the thing. So she will not only take his soul, she will take his soul, but in a sense, when you take a soul of somebody, it will take his life. Now, when he heard, then he was afraid. Okay? So whatever threats king sends, he didn't really respond, but then he was afraid. And he arose and ran for his life. And he came to Beersheba. Apparently it's some kind of beer plant. Just kidding. Which belongs to Judah. Okay, so there were guys, so we have some Miller or Budweiser, and that was Sheba, And left his servant there. So, couple things. Since I told you that we are in the split Israel, okay, so the border goes somewhere over here. It's not real up to scale, but Mount Carmel it's a little bit closer to. Have you ever heard city Haifa?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Mount Carmel is not far away from there. Okay, they actually have that's the place I want to go somewhere. We have a list of things where I want to go. Like, for example, I want to go to, where's that? Buenos Aires, I think, where Jesus is on the mountain, with stretched hands, I want to see that stuff. Some things in the world I would like to see. And this is one of them. On the Mountain Carmel, he is like on a pedestal with his figure and with a sword like this. So, and dead bodies are around, so on and so forth. So from here, he goes to, and Beersheba is very on the south, like roughly over here. So he goes not simply into Judean territory. This is Judah. Okay, and this is Israel. Okay, so we have kingdom on the north, kingdom on the south. So he goes not simply crossing the border. He could have crossed the border like to Tijuana and be, oh, bye, I'm safe. No. He goes really deep south, like further than City, Mexico. Like really. Like probably up to Guatemala, what we would compare. Like really far, or what would be something? Oh, Venezuela, where American powers not really have so much influence, Yeah, so somewhere down there where he cannot be found. He goes there. Turns out, from this verse, we find out that it was actually two of them. He always had an assistant with him, but he leaves his assistant there. The word for assistant is very important. It's the word na'ar. I guess slowly but surely we need to begin a Hebrew class. So you guys can read the original and then we can talk about real stuff. But the thing is, na'ar very often is translated as a boy or a youth. For example, in the second book of Kings, when Elijah dies, his successor, Elisha, comes back, and we have this weird story. Boys were teasing him, and then the bear came out and tears them apart. It's like, what's this goofy stuff? Okay, first of all, it's the same word, na'ar. They were not boys. They were deacons at the shrine of Bethel. And what is Bethel? It's on the border here. Bethel is one of the golden calf shrines that the first king of the northern kingdom installed. He installed two of them. One in Bethel on the south and one on the north in Dan. So it was kind of like a borderlines for the kingdom. The reason is he did not want people to go to worship to Jerusalem, so he had two of his own stuff. If you want to know more about this, this is 1 Kings 12. But the point is, these guys are servants of golden calf. Okay? So it's not boys. So this story is not applicable to irreverent boys from Sunday school who tease their pastor about his boldness. It's not about that. The thing is, just for a second, if we'll go there, it's what is it? It's chapter 1? No, chapter 2. Chapter 2. The reason why they tease him is because he lost his teacher. He used to be a Nazirite, and if you're a Nazirite, what happens with your hair? You are not allowed to cut it, okay? So they grow long. So they see him crossing Jordan one way with long hair, then he comes back, and since he was in the presence of a person who is going into somewhat death state, he experienced some death. He went through some death experience when Elijah is taken to heaven. What is he doing? He begins his new cycle of ministry. Therefore, he shaves his head. Okay? So they thought he cut his hair because his teacher is dead. They did not know that he ascended into heaven. So they began to tease him on his grief. Okay? They began to tease him because of his loss. Instead of that, he comes back with, if you remember, he comes back with double power of Elijah. And since they worship God of nature, which is Baal, he invokes the nature to respond. And therefore, bear comes and tears them, 42 of them. So that's a short story here.